there a library or source where all these things are available?
What's
All the
that?
various Shiur and stuff?
Yeah, you have. I sent it to you once. There's
But are they labeled by topic or just by date?
no, you have to just like leaf through it, and you have to find. So it goes in date order.
It's a date order.
Yeah, and at a certain point they delete them because they have to make room. So it's always the current ones.
Who's the they?
Send me.
There should be a permanent record for the library or something.
Because it's a limited amount of room space. I can ask her if this.
It makes it easy to find if it's not on top.
Okay. It's on record. I'm trying to get Nathan. Shiur, and then they have birthday clubs. I asked people. So I'm trying to get them.
That's not his thing.
No, something small. It's not Shiur.
Yeah, I understand that. He's not comfortable doing that.
They say I think something for him that he would be comfortable with, and it's not so deep. So.
He's more of a student than a teacher.
Yeah, okay. Okay, go whenever.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Yoshua.
Good morning, Rabbi. Good morning.
Other announcements, Mendy? Okay. There are no announcements, so we'll jump right in. Why do we do what we do and how do we do it? Is a major question in Jewish life. There are many laws and there are many customs, and sometimes the laws and the customs kind of overlap, and sometimes custom affects the way you observe certain laws. There's halacha, there's a strict interpretation of what the law is. There's a hashkafic approach, hashkafa, which would be your philosophical attitude towards any particular mitzvah. And then there are other influences, regional influences and customs, Kabbalistic influences, and all these kind of merge together into how we behave as observant Jews. There's one of the mitzvahs in the Torah, of course, is that on every four-cornered garment that you have to affix ritual fringes or tzitzis. How we do that, how you wear them, is a subject of tremendous dispute, and it exists very much today. There are many people who wear their tzitzis out. There are many people who wear it under their clothing. There are some people who wear the talis katan over their shirt, but under a vest, as many Hasidim do. And all these are based on different halachic understandings of what the mitzvah is. If you look, we say it every day, twice a day. Everybody, men, have to wear tzitzis, urisem also, and you have to see them. And remember, uzachartem is called mitzvos. By wearing tzitzis during the day, and it's a beged yom, but not a beged laila, you remember the mitzvos. And there are different permutations, adding up all the various knots and so forth. You get to the number of 613. But there are important interpretations of how we look at these mitzvahs. Urisem also. What does that mean, urisem also? Does it literally mean you have to be able to physically see the tzitzis, which would imply that you have to wear them out? You see them all the time. What's that? Urisem, okay, but we will go through the words in terms of what Urisem also means. But the purpose of the begadim of these items is that it sits, according to many mefarshim, the Barbanel in particular has a long discussion about the tzitzis. If you hang them out and they literally, they blow, they slap you in the face, they remind you of the mitzvahs of the Torah. The primary importance of it is to see them. Urisem also, to be able to see them. So if you're wearing them tucked in under your shirt, you can't see them. So you have to literally wear them on the outer layer of your clothing. And this is an historical discussion, because at one point, way in the distant past, people used to wear poncho-like garments, four-cornered garments, and it's those garments that were required to have tzitzis. Now, when people's garments changed and they were no longer wearing those four-cornered garments, technically, you're not obligated to wear tzitzis on a four-cornered, unless you're wearing a four-cornered garment. So the rabbis decreed that we should all wear a smaller four-cornered garment in order to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis, which is what we do today. Unless you're in Mexico or certain parts of South America, you don't wear four-cornered ponchos anymore. That is not our style of dress. So you wear these mini four-cornered garments, but then the question is, if you're wearing these four-cornered garments above your clothing or under your clothing, and this is a huge discussion among the Rishonim, and then the Achronim, of course, chime in afterwards. The Mefarshim point out, for example, that when you're naked, when you're not wearing any clothing at all, your bris milah reminds you of Hashem and the mitzvahs. When you're dressed and you're wearing a garment that has tzitzis on it, that is what reminds you. Urisem oso uzachartem. When you see the tzitzis, you'll be reminded of Torah u'mitzvos. And again, the ideal is to behave properly without having these physical reminders, but human beings being human beings, you need a little extra push sometimes to remind you of what your obligations might be. The Mefarshim go into this in tremendous detail.
Hey, Greene. Hi, Greene.
So
You
the
got out
question is,
early today. Hey, boy. That's you, Cody? That's
All
Cody. That's my boy, Cody.
there's another pasuk. Aside from the pasuk in Shema that we say, there's the pasuk in Dvarim that talks about gedilim tasal. It's a separate obligation of wearing the tzitzis. So you have two places in Chumash where it's talked about. The Rishonim are split, whether you have to wear it on top of your clothing or under your clothing or somewhere in between, based on interpretations of psukim. And you have, I think, three schools of thought. You have those who are very strict about wearing it outside, and those who are very strict about wearing it inside. And then you have an intermediate position that we'll try to get to. Most Rishonim and Achronim are pretty, they come down to the side of wearing it outside. Basically, it kind of keeps you in line. But there are a number of great Rishonim and Achronim who wear their tzitzis inside. The Shloh, for example, in the 16th, 17th century, he says that he wears his talis katan under his clothing. And the reason that many Mefarshim give is because if you're walking in the street sometime, you might get mocked. People might make fun of you to see you walking around with these tzitzis hanging out. So in order to avoid being mocked, they would wear it under their clothing. But on the other hand, there are the Levush and others, Magen Avram, the beged might be worn under your clothing, but the tzitzis themselves should be out. The ikar is to see the tzitzis, not necessarily the the beged itself. The Aruch HaShulchan, again, wants it to be seen. And again, the Mishnah Brura is very, very strict in favor of wearing it tzitzis out. Again, not necessarily the beged, but the fringes themselves. And he says that if you stick it in, it's inappropriate because the whole idea of tzitzis is uri semoso. You have to be able to see them. Interesting though, on the pasuk uri semosam, the Gemara has a totally different take. The Gemara Menachos says the purpose of uri semosam to teach you that it's a beged yom, not a beged laila. It's a whole different concept altogether. That you wear it during the day when you can see it, and technically, there's no obligation to wear tzitzis at night, based on uri semosam. Now, people do not go around and taking off their tzitzis when the sun sets. We don't see that happening. But technically, according to the Gemara, it's a beged yom, not a beged laila. All right. And again, so you have those who wear it on top of their clothing, those who wear it under the clothing and the tzitzis sticking out, but all based on the fact that you have to see the tzitzis. And tucking it in shows a certain contempt, according to many Mefarshim. The Tzitz Eliezer, 20th century posek, says that in contemporary Israel, Eretz Israel, we don't have a fear of being made fun of. It's people are used to seeing people wearing tzitzis. So there's no fear of Chilul Hashem, and you're not worried about it. And doing this mitzvah may lead you to other mitzvahs, and therefore there's no problem wearing tzitzis out. But he says, and language is very, when you're dealing with Psak Halacha, language is very important. He says, Nachon, it's appropriate, it's correct, it's right. But Nachon is not the same as Chayav, obligatory. It's proper to wear your tzitzis out, but it may not be vitally necessary to the observance of that particular mitzvah. It's preferable, but it's not a chiyuv. Yeah.
Mister, you've got these white strings sticking out of your clothes.
Yeah. All right.
I said, thank you.
Again, there are poskim on both sides of this issue. There are those, again, the preponderance would say to wear it out. Whether it's the entire beged, just the tzitzis, that's a technical difference, but the preponderance of the early Rishonim and some Achronim and some contemporary poskim would say that it's appropriate to wear it out. You'll notice among Hasidim, you have an interesting interpretation based on some of the Mefarshim, that they wear the beged on top of their shirt, but then they put a vest on top of the beged, and just the tzitzis hang out, which is also a variation of one interpretation. On the other hand, you have a number of legitimate Rishonim and Achronim who say that you don't have to wear them out. Rabbeinu Yonah, the Radvaz, all the Mordechai quotes his Rebbe, the Maharam Rutenberg, who would wear his talis cotton under his clothing. The Vilna Gaon wore his talis cotton under his clothing. And yeah, so these are reliable people. Again, the words of the Torah are sufficiently vague that it allows for this variation of interpretation. One of the reasons why you wear the talis katan under your clothing is mentioned because it allows you, for example, to enter a cemetery or a bathroom. We don't wear tzitzis out in the cemetery. Okay, that's what they call loeg l'rosh. You're making fun of those who are dead and buried who can no longer observe mitzvahs. So you tuck your tzitzis in if you normally wear them out when you enter a cemetery. And of course, going to a bathroom, if your tzitzis are out, again, it might be considered inappropriate. The Aruch HaShulchan says that it wasn't the custom in his time to wear it out, even though the Mishnah Brura is very, very strict about it. But he says that by tucking your tzitzis in, it's as if you're embarrassed to do mitzvahs. So, again, he doesn't say it's prohibited to wear them in, but he prefers that you have the tzitzis out. All right, the bottom line is that you have two different schools of thought. There's a third school of thought, which is based on the Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic teaching. The Ari, who was one of the major schools of thought in Kabbalistic teaching, he wore his talis katan under his clothing. And this became the accepted practice among those who follow the Kabbalistic teachings. And the Magen Avram quotes it. And you have a whole discussion. When you have a conflict between the halacha and the Kabbalah, who do you follow? Hasidim would tell you follow the Kabbalah. And those who are not Hasidim would follow the halacha. And this also plays out in many areas, that specifically in terms of wearing the tzitzis in or wearing them out. Among the Sfardim, the practice is to wear the talis katan under your clothing, because they follow the Ari, most Sfardim. Avad Yosef writes about this, and he says that it's proper to wear the beged and the tzitzis in, and you don't have to worry about doing the wrong thing. In the Mir Yeshiva, in Lithuania, in Europe, it was not customary for the young men and boys to wear their tzitzis out, even during Kriya Shema. And the reason for that is, especially among the Musar yeshivos in Lithuania, because if you're wearing your tzitzis in, and to take it out, your clothing, your shirt gets untucked. And in the Musar yeshivas, they were very makpid that you look right, you should dress properly. And pulling out your tzitzis may make your clothes look a little bit disheveled. So you have in legitimate yeshiva circles people who would not wear their tzitzis out. Again, the Vilna Gaon, again, the Hasidim have a whole different Masorah, even though they follow the Kabbalah. Nevertheless, in this particular case, they don't follow the Ari, which is unique. You can make a whole discussion about when the Hasidim follow Kabbalah and when they don't. The Lubavitcher Rebbe tries to explain this, and he said that the Ari wore his tzitzis inside his clothing, and he gets into the whole Hasidic and philosophical about chitzonios and panemios, externals versus internals, but it's such on a high level of understanding that this was not meant for the masses, and therefore he recommends it. Today, you have most yeshiva bachrim are accustomed to wearing their tzitzis out. Among the Briskers, Chaim Brisker was within the line of the Vilna Gaon. So the compromise is they wear the talis katan under your clothing, and the tzitzis don't hang out, but they wrap them around their belt. So if you'll see very often a person just has the tzitzis wrapped around their belt, not necessarily hanging out. That would be a compromised position. That's what Rabbi Yudin does, and many others. Again, is the purpose of tzitzis to be worn or to be seen? That's the key question. What is the purpose? Is it, do I have to look at it to be reminded, or others should look at it and be reminded? And this is a whole philosophical discussion. But the beauty of Torah is that you have a number of legitimate positions that allow you to fulfill the biblical mitzvah of tzitzis. First of all, gedilim tasalecha, you have to make the tzitzis. So you have to have a garment that is suitable to put tzitzis on. So we wear a talis katan because we don't wear a poncho anymore. Fine. Then uri'isa moso, the Gemara says, means that you wear it during the day, not at night, in terms of obligation. But others interpret it literally. You have to literally see the tzitzis. It's a reminder. But again, you might be made fun of depending on what neighborhood you walk in. For example, on Tisha B'Av, we don't wear leather shoes. But the halacha is, if you work among non-Jews and they would make fun of you, if you are working in a fancy law office and you're wearing a three-piece suit and a nice pair of shoes, and you come to work wearing sneakers, that's very inappropriate. So you'd be, among non-Jews, you would be allowed to wear shoes even on Tisha B'Av to avoid being made fun of. So similarly, tzitzis, if you're in a non-Jewish environment, tzitzis hanging out, there would certainly be no hesitation about tucking them in. Whether it means under your clothing or just wrapped around your belt, based on what traditions you come from. So you have an example of a biblical mitzvah that's open to a wide variety of interpretations, that whatever you do, as long as you're wearing the tzitzis, you're doing it right. Whether the tzitzis themselves are out or in, depend on your background, depending on which particular school of thought you want to follow. But it's a fascinating discussion, and you have legitimate major authorities on both sides of the issue. So as long as you're wearing tzitzis, you're okay. Whether they're out or whether they're in, depending on what particular perspective you would like to follow in terms of this interesting mitzvah. Of course, before I answer that question, Nathan, I'm not even getting into, by the way, the whole other discussion of how you tie the knots on the tzitzis. That's a whole other parsha all the way. If you're in Israel and you go into in Mea She'arim, in any of the stores that sell tzitzis, you will see a huge panel which has 15 different variations of tying the strings.
I think you brought that once to show.
Yeah, I showed a picture of it once. And all the different ways, and with the blue, without the blue, and the different variety of knots. There are many, and including among all the Rishonim have different knots. There's one that says Rav Shechter. Rav Shechter has a different interpretation of how you tie the knots. And I said to the guy, in Yiddish, I said, I know him. And this guy has no idea who Rav Shechter is. He says, he's still alive? Because all the other was all the Rishonim, all the different things there. So that's a whole other parsha of how you tie it, and the blue, and that's a whole other thing. Okay, Nathan, your question.
Yeah, how is that considered a time-bound mitzvah?
Yes, technically, according to the Gemara, your only obligation to wear tzitzis is during the day.
So that's why women are not obligated?
Probably. It's mitzvah seishes mangroma, yes.
No,
Although I will tell you, many years ago, I had a conversation with a young lady who really wanted to wear tzitzis. Because it said, if I wore tzitzis, I would feel closer to Hashem. Religious young lady. But I know that if the word got out that I was wearing tzitzis, I'd never get a shidduch. So now she's married to a Rabbi and everything's fine. But the point is, women are not obligated to wear tzitzis, and they're not obligated to wear tefillin either, for that matter. Although you did have situations of women, very rare, but you did have some women. I'm not talking about the modern. It's a whole other parsha. But there were legitimate rabbinic women who wore tzitzis. Some wore tefillin as well. Whole other story. But women are exempt. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
The name escapes me, but it's a rabbi that used to wear 100 years.
Rav Scheinberg. Yes.
What was the reason?
Well, because there are everybody agrees that the mitzvah of tzitzis is a biblical mitzvah. Okay, so you got to be very careful about observing biblical mitzvahs. But since there are many different interpretations of how to properly fulfill the mitzvah, how the different knots on the tzitzis and so forth and so on, so he wore many different pairs of tzitzis in order to fulfill that particular mitzvah, which meant you looked like a bulked up football player because there were all these different pairs of tzitzis he wore every day. Could be, yes.
I ask about that. I I understand the desire to be Yosef, but if you are Yosef on pair number 7 that you're wearing, pair numbers 1 through 6, you're not Yosef, and you're not allowed to wear them because they're Abracantos. They're higher than 6, so how could you do that?
Well, because so big, they had tzitzis.
No. But if the one that's Yosef is number 7 or number 10, then the others are not Yosef.
Okay, but he didn't know which one was the one. Okay, so that's why he was the only one who did that.
Unless you have strings on each one of them, on one minute, you have all the different practices.
Yeah, well, that would be enough. Then I haven't heard anybody doing that. Because that would be a very heavy pair of tzitzis. You need a very large hole to put all the strings through.
And you have to have full strings.
Well, and the techeles and how you tie the knots. There Baruch Hashem, there are many, many different ways to perform mitzvahs. The important thing is that we perform them but to the best of our ability, whatever particular school of thought you follow. And there's a separate discussion. Do you have to wear wool or can you wear cotton? That's a whole other discussion.
Or mesh.
Yeah, mesh. Yeah, well, it's cotton. But again, all of this discussion and all of this variation points to one very important thing, that when you're dealing with mitzvos min haTorah, these are not rabbinic, these are biblical mitzvahs. Hashem wants us to wear tzitzis. So we try very hard to try to understand what is it that Hashem wants of us. What type of tzitzis? What type of configuration of nuts? And what about the tcheles? Is tcheles, if we don't have real tcheles, does that prevent us from performing the mitzvah properly?
Yeah.
And that's a whole other discussion about the reintroduction of tcheles. People have tried it throughout history. The Rishner Rebbe thought he had it. That didn't work out. And the chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Hertz, also thought he discovered the right tcheles, and that was debunked. Now there's a new Tcheles Institute, which seems to have captured Rav Schechter for sure and others, and then there's a whole movement of wearing Tcheles now. Because if you don't have Tcheles, perhaps you're not fulfilling the mitzvah at all. So there's a whole other area, and I hesitate to get into that discussion of what is Tcheles and which particular shellfish you have to crush to get the dye. And there's a whole industry in Israel now, the Tcheles Institute, and there are factories that are producing tcheles, and it's become very, very trendy in many yeshivos today for the boys to wear tcheles in their tzitzis and in their talesim. And you see that wherever you travel in the world today, more and more people have tcheles in their talesim and tzitzis. That's a whole other discussion that perhaps we may or may not get into in the future. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy your mitzvah of tzitzis, whether you're an innie or an outie.
Thank you, Wally.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Wally. Have a good
I
day.
do. Go to. Thank you.
Amen. Amen.
That's what I did.
It's okay?
What?
It's all right?
Yeah, on Wednesdays, every other week, the cleaning girl comes, so, she's new, so she doesn't really much.